Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of Footnotes and Fairytales. This is the first in what I hope to be a series of 10 interviews with people specifically from Newry. The aim is to celebrate Newry, its people and their successes, people that are innovative, creative, and that are doing groundbreaking things in their field. My first guest, he is essentially the creative force behind the web-based comedy series Taxi Joe. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you the man behind the mustache, Mr. Gino Lynch. Just firstly, I mean, when you're in town and around Newry, do people make that connection? I mean, granted, the character is essentially a mustache and glasses, so there's a kind of a Clark Kent thing, you know.
Yeah, there's a bit. If some, yeah, some. I mean, you get people not coming up to you all the time, especially it depends. You know, it all depends. If you've got a video out that's very popular, you know, at the time, and then you're out and about, you get people talking to you all the time and taking selfies with you and all that sort of thing. But then some people don't recognize you, and then when some people come up to you and they're chatting away to you, it's like they're just like, you're not Taxi Joe, you know what I mean? They expect whenever they meet me that I'm exactly like Taxi Joe, you know what I mean? I go on like him. I even get like somebody and you get this all the time. Somebody texts me just before Christmas, you know, what taxi firm do you drive for? Somebody actually thought I was a taxi driver, so he just texts him back, "Oh, I drive for Clonray." He goes, "Oh, fuck, made drive for Taxi Lane and all. Oh, I thought you might know him. He told me his name and all." I was like, Jesus, not a taxi driver from on, like, do you know what I
mean? And how do you find that taste of celebrity? Do you enjoy it?
I don't mind it. Like, I mean, I live in Belfast now, and it's only in Newry, really. You get it very occasionally. It happens in Belfast, like. So I don't mind it. It's flattering, like, and you know, if people come up to you and they'll talk to you about it, or they want to take a photograph or whatever, you know, they've invested time into watching your stuff, so you've got to appreciate that, you know. And I'm always very appreciative of people that take the time out to watch what we do, because what you find now is, or what we found doing the web series is, like, people have so much choice in terms of content. You know, there's just like a content overload on Netflix and Disney and Apple TV. There's normal TV, all the sport that's on. It's even with sport, there's just more and more sport. If you're into sport, it's impossible to keep up with all the sport. Never mind watch all the TV series that are going on and different things like that. So, you know, with all that content, and if people take the time out to watch my stuff, you know, if somebody comes up to you, you know, it's best to give them that time, you know.
Yeah. Now, for those who potentially don't know you, if I were to ask you to introduce Gino Lynch to someone, how would you do that? I mean, how would you describe yourself?
I would just say I'm a filmmaker, you know, and that's something I've been doing for a number of years. Like, when people see my stuff, you know, they tend to put two and two together and think I want to be a comedian or I want to be an actor or something like that, but I don't really. The Taxi Joe thing, me being Taxi Joe, sort of came out of necessity rather than choice, really. And it came from when I watched The Office the first time, the British Office.
Yeah.
So I seen Ricky Gervais doing, like, he directed it, he wrote it, and he was David Brent, and I was just like, that's what I want to do, you know. But you know, and since the web series and all, a few people have asked me, do I want to act in a few shorts or whatever, and I'm just like, no, and they're a bit surprised, like, because they think, like, you know, I want to be an actor. And I'm like, no, definitely not. It was, I enjoy doing the Taxi Joe thing, and I love making the videos with you. You know, the smaller ones we do, and we have great crack doing it. But when, like, we done the web series last year, the thing I enjoyed most about it was the directing, was the creative process of the storytelling. You know, like, acting's a very specific thing in itself, where you know, people have to be that character and get lost in that character. You know, whereas if I'm on a film set, you know, I wouldn't want to get lost in something. You know, and just be that. I want to be behind the camera. I want to be, interacting with the crew and constructing how we're going to put that story together visually.
And if I
Do
could
you know what I
ask,
mean?
like, how did you ultimately you want to be a filmmaker and to be seen as a filmmaker?
Yeah.
How did you find the demands of being everything in the production?
It was really difficult last year. When we were doing the web series, there was a lot of challenges involved in that. Now, when we were doing our smaller videos, it's not so much because, even if it's a phone or a camera or whatever, and it's just me talking to the camera, it's very straightforward. And the thing with that is you can just do it on your own accord. You can just do it whenever whereas if you're making something and you've got a crew and you've got a load of actors, everybody has to be scheduled to be there at a specific time, and then you've got a certain amount of time to do what you need to do. And then, and then, like on a big shoot, you would have, a DOP, you would have an editor, you would have producers, you'd have a production office, you'd have an art department. Like, we didn't have any of that. Now, we had a cinematographer, Anthony Breen, who shot most of it, and he was brilliant. But I was essentially the production office. I was the editor, was the producer. My mate Ali McKenzie helped produce it as well. But that was in his free time. It was just what free time he had.
And did you find it difficult from being behind the camera, offering direction, and then ultimately having to cross that line and then star in that particular scene?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There was one night I I messed up one of the takes, but I got into the rhythm of it by the end of the shoot. But there was one night on the night shoot where it was like you're directing the scene and you're trying to figure out in your head, is this scene going the way I want it to go? But then also doing the Taxi Joe thing as well. I
Yeah.
just remember one night there was a specific moment where I was so focused on what the other actors were doing, um, I just forgot to be Taxi Joe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's a challenge, yeah. Like, my least favorite part of the whole thing would be learning lines. I
Yeah.
just it's a very boring thing to do. But um, what helps with that is when you write, you know. So when you write the
Yeah.
script, you've already got the whole scene mapped out in your head, and it's easier to remember the lines then. But the reason why it's learning the lines can be a challenge is you've got so many other things to do, before the day, and you've people ringing you before the day, and you've your shot list to figure out, and just there's so many different elements you need to figure out, and then I like, not that I hate learning lines, but it's just something that it's my least favorite part of the whole process.
Yeah. Now, from what I understand, is that the series premiered and aired late December, just before Christmas.
Yeah. So yeah, we probably made if I had to do it again, I would probably do things slightly differently. We were running out of time, you see, because I remember we shot most of it all last year, and then it took me because I was working for the last 6 months of last year and editing at night. So my day was like out of bed at like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, go to work, come home from work, edit till about 12 at night. That was my life pretty much up until December. And the clock was ticking, and we just about got it out in time for Christmas. And if I had to do it again, I would have done the cinema release over Christmas, and then I would have delayed the online release a couple of months, because our online campaign or our online marketing for the series wasn't very good. And that's not, you know, me being critical of myself in any way. It's just that we ran out of time, really.
Mhm.
Um, so I didn't, and I had like a 2 year break from doing anything on social media. And what I learned about social media last Christmas was how much it all changed in 2 years. And I didn't really take that on. I knew it changed a bit, but I didn't realize how much it changed, in the sense that, like, they call it like the TikTokification of social media, whereas, Instagram and Facebook started prioritizing different um, forms of content, and it was namely bite-sized, small video, vertical video was the thing. But there was lots of different nuances I hadn't come across, because, as I said, we hadn't posted anything online for a couple of years, and by the time the series was all posted online, I sort of got into the rhythm of what content works on different platforms. So, for instance, we released the full series on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, which would have been the thing to do 2 or 3 years ago, but it's not the thing to do now. The only platform that series suited was YouTube, whereas Facebook and Instagram that don't want long form video anymore. So, like 2 years ago, you had IGTV. Now that's changed. So I would have liked the 2 or 3 months to get my head around all that and then release it online. But I mean, like, it still went great online. Don't get me wrong, but it was all just very rushed, And like we released the full thing on Instagram. If I could do it again, definitely wouldn't put the full thing on Instagram, because it just doesn't suit that platform,
Mm-hmm. And how well was it received? I mean, I would imagine.
Oh, it was great. Yeah, it was brilliant. Yeah. It was like, it was the best response I've got to anything I've done, really. And the fact that we got it into the cinema, and it looked great on the cinema, it sounded great. It was fantastic, but it was a lot longer than stuff we'd done before. So, I mean, you're asking a lot of people to sit down and take the time out to watch that, compared to my older stuff. My older videos, if they're only a minute long, people can watch it on their phone and send it to their mates. It's not really like that with what we did last year. You really need it on a TV, or you need to sit down and dedicate a bit of time to watching it. So you find that you're competing then with Netflix and all that sort of thing when you're doing content like that, and you're not competing with your standard social media content, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, is there a vacuum specifically in the north, like Northern Ireland, where we seem to have dabbled in sitcom and you get an occasional run of a show, but there's room there for new comedy, to flourish and develop? I mean, do you see opportunities
absolutely
there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Dairy Girls has definitely opened the door for everybody else in the country, because Dairy Girls was a smash hit, and I don't think Channel 4 were expecting that, really. I think it's Channel 4's biggest sitcom probably the last 10 years, I think. And it was a really good show. It was great characters, really good dialogue, and there's a real, Lisa, who wrote the show, got the balance right of showing things that were familiar to us, but a broader audience in England could also relate to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's broad themes in it, but also the real specific nuances of our observations with the granddad and the parents and all that sort of thing. It just brought you back to childhood, so to speak. And I think this country really lends itself to comedy. It's just full of characters. Sure. It's just, and a lot of people say are affiliated with the characters that come from where they come from. But I've lived in England, and England's full of characters. Don't get me wrong, but there's something about Northern Ireland where I think it's probably a byproduct of the Troubles, in the sense that during those times, I think people relied on comedy and having a bit of crack, and that's where all these great characters came from. I think because during the Troubles there was nothing else to do but go to the pub and talk shite, and that has given us a wealth of brilliant characters that Lisa has shown in Dairy Girls, and then that we're trying to put across.
I suppose
Taxi Joe.
In part, you've probably answered one of the questions I was going to ask later. Is that the sense of humor throughout Taxi Joe is very Newry centric, in so much as people from Newry would get it straight away, you know.
Mm, mm.
But it seems to have resonated with a lot more people, and certainly in a wider area. And why do you think that is?
Well, with there was a so the idea with the web series that we did was there was a specific, there's a specific plan in place to make the comedy broader in terms of not having specific observations that only people from Newry would get. Have the Newry characters and have the characters that are really true to that area, but
Hmm.
have the themes broader, and have the stories broader. And I think, the character in himself is quite a universal character in the sense that he's an idiot. But, he's plain and simple, and he hasn't got a brain cell in his head really, but his heart's in the right place. And that's where, there's been so many characters over the years like that throughout comedy. Whereas a lot of our older material stuff with me and Q, where it's just like us with a phone or whatever, some of the videos we would have done would have been specifically about things that were happening in Newry. So obviously people outside of Newry aren't going to get that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the idea. And the idea of the web series was pretty much to show that we can make a TV show. So that was the idea of it. And, the number one goal for it wasn't a big viewing audience or whatever. It was to show production companies not only we've got the idea for a TV show, but we can make one. So like even if you like the material or you don't, I don't think there's any debate in the sense that if you watched it, you would be impressed with how it's put together. It looks like
Absolutely, yeah.
it wouldn't look out of place on the TV.
No, of course not.
And the fact that we done it for so little money as well, it harks back to me making videos for the last 10 years, and I've got a good sense of how to do things efficiently and cheaply, and and then with a lot of friends helped out, and give their free time into the project, and I've thanked them so many times now. But and it wasn't work for them. When we were making the show, I remember when we were doing the web series last year, and we'd done a week of night shoots in January. January is a good time to shoot night stuff because you get about 2 hours of sunlight,
Yeah.
during the day. So we got all our night stuff done then. But there was like everybody there was having really good crack. Like I work in the film industry and I love it. I just love the job. Like, but with this it was like everybody was hanging out and just enjoying themselves. It felt like a real social vibe. There was a real everybody's just in really good form. Everybody's really enjoying themselves. It's great, it was a really great buzz doing
I
all
mean,
that.
that's something I've noticed. It was something I was going to bring up later, but you've kind of led me into it. Is that you've always essentially used the same supporting cast, which seemed to be family in some instances. In some instances, family, but largely your group of friends. Uh,
Yeah.
that's obviously a conscious decision. And how does that help? I mean, is that
Um.
does that
Yeah.
make
Well,
you
with
feel more
this.
comfortable?
Yeah. Well, with this. Yeah. Number one, they all get the style of the comedy. They get the style of the character because they're from Newry, so they get that
Yeah,
observation. That's first, and then second, like for instance, with James McGinn's character, the mayor, who's probably the mayor's probably my favorite character, and I just love that character. I love that dynamic between the mayor and Taxi Joe. I just think it's sort of you know reminds me of like Basil Fawlty and he was not the Lord Mayor, but there was like a mayor type character in Faulty Towers. Can't remember his name now, but there's that sort of dynamic. That's what we were going for, and James just was brilliant in the role. But what really helped the character was the fact that I know him. So
yeah,
like I wrote the part for him, so you can write to his strengths. He's really good at playing that. That flamboyant style that he has. So that dynamic with him and me is, and then because me and him have known each other for so long and over so many years, we have a bit of a rapport already. So yeah, and we James, obviously Q, he gets the comedy better than anybody probably, and then obviously with this, then we branched out a bit. We had other cast involved that um
But
that were on
I
TV and
suppose
stuff like that.
having your friends on set, and given the pressures that you're under,
Mm.
with directing, acting, producing, that would, I would imagine, help alleviate some of that stress. And so much as you have people around you that you're comfortable with, that you can have fun with, it makes the job a little easier. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, well, I think the shooting, when we were shooting all the stuff, because there was so much prep put into the days, like they ran like clockwork, really. I mean, we didn't have there wasn't one shoot day where the shit hit the fan, really, and that was just there was extensive planning put in every day. And because I've worked in the film industry for so long, when I'm on set, I'm always observing how these things are put together, and I've done so many different projects as a lighting technician, from micro budget stuff to huge budget stuff, and I see where all the pitfalls are when I'm working on set, and I see where time gets lost. So when you've understanding of all that, um, when you're constructing something and you're going into prep of how you're going to shoot something, it's so beneficial, because you
Hmm.
can see all the mountains and all the molehills before they happen, and
Yeah.
we were very lucky during the shoot. I literally, well, there was one morning actually where the gates in my apartment wouldn't open up, so I had to get somebody to drive up to the apartment, and I had to climb over the gates. I had to cross load from my van into theirs,
Oh.
and we were like half an hour late or something. But again, that day we wrapped early and all, and it was fine. It was there
So,
wasn't an issue.
from when you first started recording till when you wrapped,
Yeah.
I mean, how long was that process?
Well, I tell you what I was saying to you earlier on about um not being stressful on set. It's a lot more stressful before you get to set. Sort of
Hmm.
way.
Yeah.
Getting all the people in place, getting everything organized, and trying to get crew available, like sound recordists, camera people, makeup, whatever. And the time frame we were doing that, it was very, very busy. So September 2021 was when we wanted to shoot it. And we had a 3 week thing, and I planned it for 3 months, and we had a 3 week window to shoot it. And about 2 or 3 weeks before yeah, 2 weeks before the shoot, I had to cancel it because I couldn't get the crew. I was just
Okay.
spending all that, and that was very stressful. And that's that was a moment you feel a downer. You get that, like you do get like a knockout punch, so to speak, for want of a better phrase, and you have to figure out, right, how am I going to do this now? And there's times in this when we were putting it together, I genuinely thought that it was over. It wasn't going to come together because it's so difficult to make these things, to get everybody together, get all the elements in place, to get the location sorted, and then to shoot it. When you're on set shooting it, that's the easy bit.
Yeah.
It's getting the elements in place. That's the tough bit. And then that September 2021, you know, I was like, oh no, it's over and all. And then I was in the shower and I was like, fuck it. No, I'll shoot one episode, right? If I shoot one episode, I got one done. Shot the one episode, and that was the one of me and the Pastor Wilson, the religion episode.
Yeah.
Got it shot, got it shot. And then I was like, right, I got that shot, and then I can edit it together, and then I can show people. And then that really helped because, funny enough, speaking about Dairy Girls earlier on, after I shot that episode, I went on to work in the last series of Dairy Girls, the third series, and had an absolute ball in it. It was great, and it was a great experience working on that because it was, comedy is what I want to do. I want to make a show like that in the future. And to see how that was constructed was great. And then a lot of the crew that were on that, I showed them my episode, and they're like, "Oh, that's great!" No, I'd love to do that. Da, 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 da. So then I got them involved in January 2022. And we shot a week worth of stuff there. That went great. Then there was there was a day when we got Charlie Lawson involved, and we had everything in place. We had the shoot days all sorted, we had everything in place. And then I got COVID like 5 days before he's supposed to arrive, and I said, "Oh no!" I had to cancel on him, and I was just like, and then that was an arm moment where I was like, it's over, it's gone.
But
But no,
I
you just
suppose,
keep battling on. You keep battling on, and you keep moving, and you keep. And if we got there eventually. I think we finished shooting in like May, May 2022, and then I just spent the rest of the year editing it while I was working.
yeah. And I guess part of my motivation for doing this and hopefully getting another number of people on board is to demonstrate, I suppose, people from Newry, their spirit, their ambition, their ability to overcome obstacles and flourish, and hope in some way that inspires other people that are trying to pave their own way to do wonderful things, to be bold, to not let setbacks stall their development or progress. And I think your experience is a perfect example that at times you thought it was over, and yet you persevered, and you've come out the other end of it. And I would imagine you wouldn't change it for the world.
No, definitely not. But the thing about it is, you have to do it because you love doing it. And you can't think about the outcome. You can't think about how many people are going to watch this. Where's this going to go? You just got to do it because you love doing it. You know what I mean? If you don't have that, you're not going to make you're not going to make it. Making something like what I did last year, it's just not going to happen. And one thing with the online, doing stuff online for so long really helped with was it helps you develop a thick skin, to feedback. So what you find online too is like, let's say I met somebody face to face who hates Taxi Joe and thinks it's a pile of shit, right? They're not going to say that to me.
No, of course not.
They're just going to, you know what I mean? They're just not going to say that to you. But you stick it online, not seeing personal, getting the keyboard and go, this is fucking dog shit or whatever. And some of them are actually, some of the criticisms are actually that bad. They're really funny. Do you know what I mean? One of the ones was like, did somebody order Mrs. Brown's Boys off Wish? I just messed myself laughing whenever I heard that. But and sorry, go ahead.
I just, you talk about the criticism, and is that something you're able to turn off, or is there a curiosity to see what the criticisms are?
Yeah. So that's a great point. Like, so, you have to take on board. You can't let this criticism, say if it's, this is dog shit or whatever, or this is the biggest pile of shit I've ever seen in my life or whatever. I mean, you can't do anything with that, but you can't let that affect you, and it doesn't bother me at all in the slightest. But when people have constructive things to say about it, that's when you have to listen, because audiences, no matter who's watching it, can give you value, from their feedback. And you get better value from the negative feedback than you get from positive feedback. Positive feedback's great, don't get me wrong. It's lovely when people say nice things about your work, but you really learn from the negative feedback. Somebody says, "What if you don't do this? You don't like that wee bit didn't work," or whatever. Funny enough, it was the first thing I did in front of put on a cinema, in front of an audience that actually watched it. And when you're sitting there watching it with an audience, that's great learning as well, to what jokes are working, what jokes are landing. Because like in the Omniplex, there was like 300 people there. So there was certain bits where people were like laughing and laughing and laughing. But there's some bits where they were laughing so much they missed the next few lines, But then there's other bits where you've constructed these jokes, and you're watching it and you think it's great and all, and then the audience are all watching it and you get a few wee murmurs of laughter. So like there was an instance where in episode one was the hardest one to do, to construct and all, because it was technically difficult to achieve, and because there's a lot of elements to it. There's a lot of driving in it. Driving's a very hard thing to film. There's a lot of like different locations, and there's some of the writing in it could have been better in terms of the dialogue. So I think the episode's great, but some of the dialogue I don't think worked, in the sense that there were funny observations, but they were very specific. So like there was a joke about foot doctors and podiatrists and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's just, but it would go over a lot of people's head of what the difference between a podiatrist and I can't even remember what the other one was, pediatrician and a podiatrist. I had to look all that up to understand the nuances of the differences between those. So
yeah.
There'd be a certain, because it's a sort of a very specific observation which would be lost on a lot of people. Do you know what I mean? So you learn things like that. Doctors would get that joke. You know what I mean? But not everybody would get it.
If I could touch upon the first episode, and I've only recently watched these, immensely funny. So many standout things across the series. I mean, if I look first and foremost at episode 1, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the opening sequence is a young girl played by Leah O'Rourke, who I think starred in Derry Girls. She comes up alongside the taxi, and she's looking for the taxi driver to
damsel in distress, looking for a hero to save the day,
to take her to the airport. And as the camera turns towards the taxi, I think for most people watching, the expectation is that Taxi Joe's sitting in the front seat, but lo and behold, he's lying sprawled across the bonnet of the car with no top on, sunning himself. And to be honest, that wasn't what I was expecting, and I near fell off the chair with laughter. It was
brilliant.
It was epic.
We came up with that on the day. So we were shooting it that morning. It was really sunny, and in the script, I was reading the newspaper. I'm reading the newspaper in a lot of it, and it's just a character thing, to show that he's not the person that he says he is. He says he's a grafter and all, and he's not really. He just reads the paper and talks shit all day. But so he was reading the paper in the script, but I just thought, fuck, the sun was out and all. I said it'd be far funnier if he was sunbathing,
Yeah.
And I think he needed a few rays in that chest. It was very white.
You can be forgiven. I mean,
but I'm a lot more chiseled now, and I'm in a better condition now. That was just the body I used for that specific scene,
I noticed that you're looking healthy, you're looking well. Maybe the stress has helped drop some of those few extra pounds, but I guess there was one other part. If I could just, he made a point, and I guess this is something that frustrated Leah's character, is that he had to stop at home to change his shoes, his shoes to his airport shoes. But and I've only watched it once, but am I correct in saying that the shoes were exactly the same?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean,
okay,
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So he would just say, but he's one of those guys that has his wee routines for things that don't make any sense. But you've all met them, like people who have these little routines, and you can't break that routine. So if he's going to the airport, he's putting the airport shoes on. That's just what he does,
Yeah. Very funny.
But there's some. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to move on to episode 2, which was the religious one. And Taxi Joe picks up the pastor, and he's taken him to a service. But I guess from the start of that journey until the end, Taxi Joe essentially breaks the pastor's spirit.
Yeah.
What was the thinking behind that?
Where would the genesis for that come from? Genesis, like Phil Collins. So yeah, I really, really find religion very interesting, you know,
Hmm.
and what I've tried to do with that episode was just to highlight the absurdity of how two people that essentially believe in the same thing are arguing over nuances that don't matter.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? So you're trying to highlight Protestantism, Catholic, it's about Jesus, Now, people string me up for saying that, but they're fundamentally the same religions. There's just different nuances with each one. And they wanted to show with Taxi Joe again, which is a override, which is a theme with the character that he thinks he's an expert in that field, and he's obviously not. Now he's the sort of person that he just goes to mass every week because that's what he does.
Hmm.
He doesn't know. He doesn't go into he doesn't go into the depth of why he's religious or what he's listening to or what he's learning, or because the Bible's an amazing, it's an amazing piece of work. With all the stories in it and the parables in it. There's when you go into the depths of it, it's really interesting material. But Taxi Joe's just one of those guys. He just goes to mass. And that's it. Goes
Hmm.
to mass, and like his old mass, Calvary pints much of there, right? The wife. That's again another one of his routines. And he goes to mass because that's what he's always done, and that's it. But
Yeah.
again, he finds himself an expert in it. And then what made that episode work was Donald Donald O'Hanlon was amazing in that episode.
Did a
Just
very good job. Yeah.
he's just brilliant. I'm so happy I cast him in it. He was He was so good. And what made that episode and what I learned from him was because he's got a theatre background. I don't have a theatre background, and he's been involved in acting his whole life. Um, we done a lot of rehearsals for rehearsals in his house. I think we done 4 meetups of rehearsals. That made the episode.
Hmm.
Without those four rehearsals, it probably would have turned out nowhere near as good as what it did. And that's where I had that big monologue at the end. We rehearsed that and rehearsed that and rehearsed that and rehearsed that. And the idea of it was because we had it on that one shot for like I think it was like 2 or 3 minutes, 2.5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes of without a cut, just a 2 shot, me in the front, him in the back, and me just like pounding him with a sledgehammer. And he didn't want any cuts because I think a cut into the close up of each of us would have disrupted that rhythm, would have disrupted the. It would have felt like the audience get a little micro break from it. You know what I mean? If you're just cutting to close ups of him. Whereas if you get the contrast of the two of us, him progressively, you know, going into, uh, you know, chaos in his mind and going away off onto another planet, and me just pounding him and pounding him and pounding him, keeping in that 2 shot. I think just made that whole episode that one shot.
Yeah.
And as I said, rehearsals made that. And you know, Donald, when before we met up, and he was talking extensively about the character, and he took from the character from um one of the things he took initially from the character was, which is what most people would do, because they would see it as like a character that really takes the piss out of the real evangelist religious people. And I was like, he was thinking of making that a bit cartoony, like in the M. Paisley type of
Hmm.
way, like. But I was like, no, 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 we're not taking the piss out of religion here. We're not taking the piss out of people that go to religion. This is about people's perception of religion. That's what this is all about. It's that disconnect between him and him. It's not making fun of religion. Don't want to do that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's been done enough before. It was that nuance between him and me, and we achieved all that through the rehearsals we did in his house.
I have to say that monologue that you had, it was impressive. I mean,
Mm,
I understand fully that you see yourself primarily as a filmmaker, but I
Mm.
think, I mean, you hold your own very much when it comes to acting. I think um, credit should be given. I mean, your physical comedy is impressive. I think a lot of what Taxi Joe does with his facial expressions adds to the comedic value. And yeah,
Well, I think yeah, there is big plus points to there's huge plus points to directing and there's huge plus points to directing and acting in something at the same time because, as I said, when you write the material, you know exactly what you want. You know where you're going with a character, and then that sort of sets the tone then for everybody else.
hmm,
So like that helps me direct being Taxi Joe because you're setting everything up. You know what I mean? Whereas there would be a little bit more work to do if somebody else played Taxi Joe. You've got
yeah.
another voice there. You've got somebody
Do
playing Taxi Joe, and then you've got me, and then there'd be a discussion between me and the guy playing Taxi Joe where I see the character, where he sees the character, and
can you
I think
imagine, just to interrupt you briefly? I guess you've led me to a question. Could you ever see someone else playing that character? I mean,
I don't think so. I
you,
mean, like, who knows? Like, I mean,
or do you think if someone else played that character, that they would fall short of maybe the standard you've set for him, or you know?
well, I say who knows in the sense that, like, who knows if if it gets if way way down the line in the future, could you see it being adapted somewhere in other countries or whatever? Now, obviously, you need to hit the jackpot for that to happen. That's a very very hypothetical thing to say, like, but I see this translating all over the world. I could see different versions of it, right? But in terms of someone else doing, I don't, no, I don't see that.
You
I
think
don't,
that
I
would
don't.
be?
It'd be like making Only Fools and Horses. Someone else playing the Boy. Not that I'm comparing myself to Only Fools and Horses, but that's the same analogy. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah,
you know, people are affiliate with Taxi Joe because, oh, there's Taxi Joe, but if someone else is playing it, it's like, that's not Taxi Joe anymore. That's something different.
yeah. I mean, I
So
think you embody the spirit of the character, and having watched it, and even going back to some of the earlier stuff where you just do it, you know,
yeah,
on your phone and whatnot. I can't imagine somebody else doing it and carrying it off so well. I think the two of
yeah,
you
and
are intricately linked at this point.
yeah, but that comes from like me and Q. We've done the bar circuit, as you know yourself, around Uri for a long
Yeah,
time, and that's where the genesis of Taxi Joe came from, really. And I mean, people ask me, I know who Taxi Joe is. I know who Taxi Joe's based on, and all. He's not based on anybody. He's just a Frankenstein of all those different characters I've met throughout the years. And when you're doing comedy, you can't just take somebody and put them into a sitcom. Doesn't work like that. Sitcom characters have a functionality to them that needs to work in terms of storytelling. Sort of a way.
mhm.
So you need to tailor, as I said, if I've got a Frankenstein of all these different people I've met throughout the years, it still has to be molded and shaped into a character that's fiction.
Yeah,
It's not the truth you're making; it's the illusion of the truth. Sort of a way. So it still has to be
and
made up.
since the genesis of Taxi Joe and his continued success, how has you personally, Gino Lynch, getting into a taxi? How's that experience, or has it changed the experience for you with taxi drivers in and around Newry?
That's a good question. Well, see, I live in Belfast now, so I don't really experience it much. And then when you get into a taxi, they don't really notice you if in your, because if you're in the back or whatever. But I love getting into taxis. I love it.
Yeah.
Because when this was over, when the web series was over, bear in mind I was working whilst I was editing the whole thing, and by the time it all came out online, and I was sort of like, it was a weird time because it was like all I did was work up to that point, and then all of a sudden I had to go back to work in January. But you had this free time in the evening, and it was a bit like it was the first time I ever felt, what am I going to do now?
And have you
Something that was just your whole life for 6 months, and then, but then I got into a taxi with this guy from Belfast, and he was just telling me all about Newry, and I was just like, boom, that's just back again. I just wish I had my notepad to take all the notes down. He
yeah.
was just driving down the road. He was picking his nose the whole way down the road, telling me all about Newry, telling me all about the drug dealers in Newry and all this. And then he said, he says the best thing about Newry is the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he told me all these stories. Oh, they were so funny. I was just, and he's telling me about the street life in Belfast and all. It's just like, this is great. This is just giving me, I want to get back to writing again. So,
Have you
um,
had time since it's aired, and I guess it aired late December. Now we're in April. Have you had an opportunity to sort of sit and enjoy the success, or
oh no, it's
or
weird
has it been
when you, it's weird when
anticlimactic
you,
in some way?
um, it's weird when you do the online thing in the sense that it's like, and what we were like doing with that last year, it's just like full on for all those months. It gets released, then it's over, and it's just like, um, and then it was, so it took me a while to go, right, well, what am I going to do next? So I've a better, sort of a more clear understanding of where I want to go to next. So the thing is, we've done the online world, and now the challenge is, because we want to make a TV show, like the challenge is, but how do we get into the TV world? How do we make TV, or a streaming version of this, or whatever? And that's the challenge. So there's where the hard work's gonna really kick in now. Is
So,
presenting this as a enticing proposition for a
okay.
production company to make into a TV show. So
Now,
I've got a roadmap in my head.
yeah, I guess the future's bright. Essentially, it's left in a place where you can take it anywhere you want to. Which,
Well, yeah, that's the thing, and we've built this world of characters now that you can go in a multitude of directions. So the plan at the minute is, what I want to do is I want to make a few short films, and what I want to do is get onto the funding ladders. See, for all the stuff and content I've made, I haven't, none of it's been funded, and I haven't any TV credits or anything like that. So as far as the TV industry is concerned, you haven't done anything. You know what I mean, in terms of a broadcast standard, whatever. So my thinking is, right, how do we get there then? So getting on the funding ladder will be one step to get there, and we want to create a series of short films around the characters in that world that'll help develop the world, and also again hopefully entice a potential production company to look at what we're doing and not just go, oh, it's just Taxi Joe. To make a show, you need a whole ensemble and team of characters that are gonna give a production company the idea that this thing has got longevity. So that's what they're going to be looking for if they want to commission a TV show. They're going to be looking, is there at least 3 seasons in this, if not 4 or 5 or whatever? And they particularly do that in America, and that's why, like in America, the sitcoms are like 25 episodes a year, and they run for 10 years. American sitcoms are set up in a very specific way that it's different to the way the British ones are set up, and Americans ones are set up specifically for longevity. So studying the American ones is really good. Friends, for example, whether you like Friends or not, the way that show is set up is brilliant, because you can just think of a multitude of things these 6 characters can all do with each other, because they're just like a football team.
yeah, yeah.
They all complement each other so well. It's a great mesh between the 6 of them. So that's where you got all that longevity. That's where you got the 10 years of storylines there. So that's where, when I was building the world for the web series, I was learning a lot from the American sitcoms, how to build this world where we can have so much story potential over a number of years. So there's elements to what I want to do with a TV show that we haven't even introduced yet.
Mhm.
And for example, his wife, Martin Hanlon's got a woman in as well. Now there's people that say to me, I like the fact that we never see the wife, which is
That's
funny
something
for,
I've seen before. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not know
yeah,
if you're familiar with the British comedy series Dad's Army. I mean,
yes,
this is,
yes,
late 60s, 70s, into 80s, perhaps. The lead character, or one of the leads, being Captain Mannering, and there's constant reference to the wife.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
The inference is that she's this big woman,
Hmm.
but over the course of the
But
series, you never see her.
the thing about Dad's Army is about the the army in, in war.
Yeah,
So you're not going to get the wife in that world. It wouldn't make sense for the wife to be in that world. Do you know what I mean?
but
Whereas
what do you
with
mean?
what I'm doing,
Yeah,
um, the thing about Taxi Joe and why he's in, like, he's become an easy character to write about is he's the ultimate sort of fish out of water with the modern world. He doesn't get the modern world, right? So technology, drugs, what kids are doing these days, and all that. He just doesn't get any of that, and that's what we tried to put across in the web series. But you bring love life into that, all of a sudden you've got a multitude of potential and storylines that were, you know, you know, because there's so much comedy potential in him trying to figure women out, or thinking he knows everything about women. I think
yeah.
he knows everything about his wife, and there's just
Do you,
so much potential with him and the
do,
wife.
do you think? I mean, over the course of the series and even preceding videos, there's been a picture painted in some respects of his wife.
Yeah,
Do,
yeah,
do, do you think it would be difficult to cast her if you want to bring her in?
yeah. That's a really good question. Yeah, I think it would be. Yeah, I think it.
Or
I think the let's say, again, in a hypothetical situation, if we're making a TV show, I would say that's the single most important aspect of the TV show is casting the wife. Because if you
do you
get
have
that wrong,
someone?
you could be beat. No, I haven't really thought about it. I have a sitcom script written, but I wrote that years ago, and then it evolved over a number of years. But it was written before I'd done the web series. Now that I've done the web series, I'll probably go back to the sitcom script that I've written and tweak it a bit. I think fundamentally it'll be about some of the same elements, but what developed in the web series was that world we created within Yuri that I hadn't done before. Wasn't in my writing before. With John's character, Rogie's character, and all. So I got really, really into that when we were making it. Because the episode 5 with John was the most difficult one in terms of storytelling because it was the most plot heavy, and we got there. It all made sense, and plot's a very difficult thing to write without it being cliched or whatever.
I think,
Um,
having just recently watched it, I'm not sure if it's five. I think it's five. Was one of the funnier. Was that episode 5 the introduction of John?
yeah, yeah, it was his character. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think
Um,
there's a scene where you're sitting in a lay-by or a car park. You're just reading
mm,
the paper as Taxi Joe does, eating a sausage, and John Lynch's character pulls up alongside, and
mm,
there's conflict or tension there because John Lynch's character is trying to essentially do away with the world that Taxi Joe knows, that's comfortable
mm,
with, and Taxi Joe, I mean, says in effect, "I'd rather shit in my hands and clap."
yeah,
Um, and
yeah,
then John says something to the effect of, in order to maybe bring Taxi Joe on board, let's defecate together, and that was very funny. I have to give it to you.
yeah, yeah. That whole thing with John. So John,
How did no first?
like,
How did you find that experience? I mean, first, for anybody that doesn't know, John Lynch is your uncle.
mm,
He is a renowned actor. He is someone that's been in productions like Sliding Doors alongside Gwyneth Paltrow. He was in The Name of the Father with Daniel Day-Lewis. More recently, he's been in The Fall. So, I mean, first you have the dynamic that he's a huge and successful actor in his own right, but then he's also your uncle. So, how did you manage that relationship and direct him?
Um, that was definitely the highlight of the whole production. Definitely. In the sense that John, all that stuff in that episode, all John's dialogue, he made it all up. He made it all up. He improvised the whole thing. So we initially, John was going to play himself in the show. I wrote it that he played himself, and then he read it, and he's like, he was a bit unsure about it, but he wanted to be in it because he's like Taxi Joe from day dot, and the two of us have pretty much exactly the same comedy tastes, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Seinfeld, The Office. And he always wanted to be in it. But he's seen the episode with the mayor. I had a rough cut of it on the sentiment, and he was very impressed with it. And he loved the mayor character, and he loved the world, and he loved the cop and all. So he wanted to be a part of that world. He wanted to be a character in that world. He didn't want to be playing himself. And I'm so glad we went down that road, because the sort of actors playing twisted versions of themselves, it's a bit of a dated sort of gimmick in sitcoms and comedy. It was huge like 15 years ago with extras in Curb Your Enthusiasm. Curb Your Enthusiasm still does it, but they're the best.
Yeah.
It's sort of gone out. It's sort of gone out of fashion a bit. That because it's sort of been done. So I'm glad I'm so glad we went down that road. So we met up and go, right, well, what are we going to do? And because he was over, we didn't know when we were going to shoot with him, because he was over shooting Blue Lights in Belfast, and we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. And then he wanted to be a pizza delivery guy, delivering pizzas, just a guy delivering pizzas, And I thought it was hilarious. It would be classy and him on the bike delivering pizza and all. But the problem there when you're writing that is, how do you get their worlds to collide? How do you get Taxi Joe's world to collide with a guy that delivers pizza? He doesn't eat pizza.
Yeah.
We're just like, does he bump into the taxi? Does he? And then you're just like, well, why would Taxi Joe even care about a pizza man? But then if you get him where he's taken over Newry, and people see him, and then that's where it all sort of clicked. People see him as the man of the people. Taxi Joe says he's the man of the people. So that's where you get the conflict then, So this is where, and this is, if I have any advice to anybody, if they want to make something, direct something, whatever, make sure you do your homework and come prepared. Make sure you do all that, know exactly what you're doing, what you're going to shoot, how you're going to shoot it, because you got all that info, then you're sort of leading the team then, everybody then has the confidence in you to know what you're doing and all. But if you're working with someone like John, with all his multitude of experience, he's released 2 novels. He's got a 3rd book coming out.
Yeah, I've just realized yeah.
But you know what I mean? So you're dealing with someone that has so much talent and experience. He's been acting longer maybe than I've been alive. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but also his creativity and his ability to tell stories. So we came up with a character that he's going to be the drugs lord and all that. He loved it. Yes. So he then manifested this whole character, and I had the key to improvising is you can't just turn up and start winging it.
Yeah.
Now, if it's something like a small wee video that me and Q can do, that's fine. But I mean, if you're actually doing storytelling, and you've got a plot and a structure, the structure and the plot needs to be there. Like Curb Your Enthusiasm, all the dialogues improvised, but they've got a very detailed structure of where the story's going. So we had a detail of where the story was going, but then John, as I said, improvised all the dialogue. And the scene I had wrote of where it was staged was in the taxi initially. So I'm in the taxi, and John gets into the back of the taxi, and we have this exchange. John says, "No, I wouldn't do that. I don't think that's a good idea. because we were driving. Funny enough, we were driving from Belfast in Uri, and we discussed the whole thing on the way to the shoot. And he suggested that he pulls up in a vehicle,
Yeah.
and it was so much better than my idea, you know. And that's what I was saying. Like if you're making something, you've got to be open to better suggestions, and you've got to run with them, and you've got to let actors, you know. And I say this to actors all the time. I give them like breakdowns of the character, like, but I only give them breakdowns of the structure of the character in terms of the story components of the character. In terms of fleshing the actual person out, you have to leave that to them, because that, you know, that makes the character organic then. So like John's suggestion of pulling up in the thing, that just changed the whole scene. So I had all my storyboards done for him coming into the back of the taxi. So then I was thinking, how am I going to shoot this? Because it's a funky thing to shoot, because like we're like this, you know what I mean? So where do you put the camera? You can't do a two shot, because I'm looking that way and he's looking the opposite way. So if I put the camera there, I'm going to just be looking at the back of his head.
Yeah.
So I was just then I just thought back to The Wire, because The Wire had loads of scenes like that, you know. You know, the two cars pull up to each other and they shoot through the windows. So it's like, right, shoot it like that. And the challenge then with that whole scene was, because John improvised all the dialogue, I'm there running it all through my head when he's improvising, going, right, does this work for the story? Does this work for the story? And then, but also, you know, do the Taxi Joe thing. The thing in post-production where that became a big challenge was cutting it all together, because every take was different. It was all improvised, you know, that whole back and forth with me. So his scene took a lot longer to cut together than any other dialogue scene by a country mile. Like, you know, to find shots that match what he's saying, and in the reverse for me, you know what I mean? And for all the dots to connect dialogue wise, and for it all to make sense, that was a challenge to edit. And even the guy in beside John, that was John's idea to get him in beside him, and he was brilliant. He was, I was just laughing. I was laughing my head off. That was Peter Davis. He's like an old family friend, and he's just a great character, you know. But I during the edit, I was just laughing my head off at him, because through every take, he was just staring at me like that. And he didn't flinch. It was just brilliant. But yeah, that was a big challenge to edit. And then again, the whole scene in the gym, like that John was going off and, you know, is screaming and shouting like a maniac. We had the camera set up, and I thought we were just going to do like a camera rehearsal. But John was sitting there ready to go, and lucky enough, the record button was hit, and he just sat up and he just started the scene. But we had the camera position all set and all, but I wasn't prepared. He was just so in that character and in that zone that day, and you just have to go with him. You know what I mean? Go with what he's doing and fit everything else around it. And it was so funny that day because he was because it was improvised. We didn't know what was coming next, and I was laughing so much behind camera. There's tears coming out of my eyes. There's bloody snots coming out of my nose.
That probably leads me into the next thing I was going to bring up, and it relates to the scene in the gym where he's, you know, giving the two young lads Bingo and Charlie, or Bungo and
he calls Pongo and Harvey.
Harvey. He's given them a reprimand essentially. Yeah. The scene then changes, I guess, when the two lads leave, and John's character's friend comes over and I think starts to massage his back or his neck.
Yeah.
But here you have this strong character from the underworld, you know, who's projecting strength and aggression. And then he says, "Is my crack showing? These are new jeans." And that was funny enough in its own right, but then he finishes it with, "You would tell me if my crack was showing." And I swear to God, lad, I near buckled over laughing. Was that
and
written
then he was massaging them. No, all that was improvised. Everything
Okay,
about that was improvised. And then when he was massaging them and all, he's going, "What was the name of that dwarf, midget or dwarf?" Can't remember what he said. And he goes, "Mickey." He just came up with that in the day, Mickey. And see when he said Mickey, I mean, the whole place just erupted with laughter. Yeah, but I learned a lot from that. That whole episode and that whole, what we did on that day, that made me want to go. I want to do improvisation a bit more, because there was something really raw about that performance and what we got in that episode that I'd love to do again. It just felt so cool shooting that. But what I would do is if I was shooting improvising again, I would use two cameras and I would
Hmm.
cross shoot. So it's just that it would just make things so much easier in post production. Because if you improvise one take, you've got two sides of the same take. Whereas if you've only one camera, you've only one side of that take. And as I said earlier on, trying to get the other side to match what he said on the previous take is difficult because
I
it's
suppose.
different. All those takes are different. The dialogue content's different all the time when you improvise.
How do you manage improvisation in so much as when you don't know what's going to be said in the scene, and then it creates, like you said, behind the camera, you couldn't help yourself but
Yeah,
laugh.
just eruptions of laughter.
How do you manage that? Do you have to retake, or do you have to
Yeah, you
reshoot
should.
the
You should.
scene?
Yeah, yeah. What we did with John was we just shot. I think we done like 4 or 5 takes with him on the the scene where he's pulling up in the car, and we done two sizes lensways, close up, and we had them because of the way we shot it. Which was a challenge again for cutting purposes. But whenever he's going off on his tangents, you just have to just have it all running through your head and just figure out, you know, you've got a path in your head. So it was like when the two of us were improvising, he was going away off on tangents, and then I was taking things back to the road again, which actually
Hmm.
worked very well for in terms of directing because you're in the episode. I can manipulate where the dialogue's going to go within the scene because I was the one in that scene that had to understand where all the story points of the dialogue were going to go.
Hmm.
So I would just take him back and mention certain things and then get him to go off on other tangents. And then by the end of it all, you just have to think, have I got everything here? Have we hit all the story beats? That's all you can think of. And if you
I
have,
don't,
then you move
and
on. It's not,
are,
you,
are you
you don't have the
conscious
dialogue.
of those things whilst you're filming the scene? Like whilst you're delivering lines, are you still? Is there part of your mind that's like,
Well, yes. Well, the thing is, we shot John first, so the camera's not on me.
okay,
So
yeah,
so my dialogue to him is feeder lines really. Now
hmm,
you still need to perform to get the best out of him, but the camera's not on me, so it's more of a I'm. It's easier then for me to set him down
okay,
the
yeah, yeah,
path than when the camera's on me. Then so when we go on to me, I sort of know what gaps I have to fill in based on what we shot on his side, because
okay,
you've no dialogue or script to work off. You just have
yeah.
to. So when you're that's one of the advantages of writing, directing, and edit and being in it is you're so familiar with the story, you really know what you need story wise. God knows what dialogue he's going to come out with, but story wise what you need.
And I suppose if we move on from that episode, I think then episode 6, we
Mm-hmm.
also were introduced to Charles Lawson's character.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for anybody not familiar, he was a running character in Coronation Street for many, many years as Jim McDonald.
Yeah.
How was that relationship cultivated? Like, how did you bring him on board? And
Um. We Ali McKenzie who produced it with me got a contact for his agent, and we just went from there. Really. Now, when I wrote the part, I had him in my head. I was just like, he's who I want when I was writing it, but I didn't think I'd get him. But the reason why I just thought he would be perfect for the world, um, and the way he's sort of become like a meme phenomenon, with his ways of dialogue in Coronation Street, in particular with his interactions with Liz and stuff. There's a lot
yeah,
of Northern Ireland nuances to what he says. But that was breakthrough stuff whenever he did it in the 90s because we didn't really have anybody on mainstream TV that spoke like us.
Mhm.
So that's why Jim McDonald, the character, and Charles Lawson was such a big deal, because he was the first of his kind. He was the first, because Northern Ireland, if you hear the way people talk in Northern Ireland, and this is one of the reasons why I think Derry Girls was successful in England initially, why people's ears perked up, is our accents are very peculiar. They're very, and there's so many different ones. You only have to go 5 miles down the road and someone
Yeah, yeah,
sounds completely different to you. So to hear someone with all them nuances of "so it is, so I am, so all that carry on Coronation Street," people here could relate to that. And I always had a huge affiliation with his character on screen in Coronation Street, and I thought he was brilliant. I just thought he lit up the screen every time he was on that show, and that's just who I had in my head. Uh, and again, got in touch with his agent, and he got back to me. He says he loves the script, he wants to do it, and I was like, "What?" That was amazing. But then when we had it all in place and I got COVID, we thought we lost him and we thought it's over. But then I got a plan back in place, and we got there in the end, and even like getting the airplane and all that sort of thing. There was a lot of work involved in getting that, and when we took like the airplane that we got, it looked like something out of Wacky Races. It just looked perfect.
yeah,
When he gets in and he's saluting and all, there's one of those things when there's so many elements to making this, where we got so lucky with weather, with just so many different elements all just fitted into place. And Charlie was amazing in the show. He was, I couldn't ask for more, and yeah, the way he carried his dialogue, he was really professional. He's fantastic.
yeah. Um, I think probably a wonderful addition, and not that it was necessary to add two or three big cameos from John Lynch, Charles Lawson, and
Yeah,
your cousin, but I
yeah,
think it added something that made the whole experience more relatable to people from where we're from.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, having Lawson, John, Rogie, Leah, all those, it give it, when you show that to people, it's an elevation in terms of the names you have involved, but also the
Oh, for
talent you have
sure.
involved, the
Yeah, yeah,
diversity. It's just not just me and Q anymore.
yeah,
There's a lot more going on here. There's a lot more, and I think that when it comes to directing TV, um, the biggest part of the job with directing is casting for comedy, getting the casting right. You get the cast right, they'll do a lot of the work for you. And Lawson, John, James McGinn, Donald, Leah, all those guys all took the characters. The cop Colin Nash all took the characters to places I didn't envision. And when you see you've written it all and you've got it in your head, and then when people elevate the material, it's like bloody hell. It's an amazing experience. But
yeah.
it's
I
like
think there
it's an
was.
experience you want to get again. It's like you want to do that again. It's like, but it could be. Hopefully in the summer we shoot something. But as I said, it's very hard to get all these elements in place. And if I could have that as my job, to go on set and direct, wow, what a job that would be. It's amazing.
Well, I would imagine. I mean, I've followed you for a long time, and lucky enough to call you a friend. I can imagine that that's where you're headed. Given your talent,
Yeah,
given the.
hopefully, yeah, hopefully. But the thing is, like, there's a lot of elements need to fall into place. I mean,
Mhm.
you need a bit of luck. You need the right break. You need to meet the right people. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things
Yeah,
that are
yeah,
out of my control as to whether this becomes a TV show or it doesn't become a TV show. And if it does or it doesn't, I'm happy enough. Do you know what I mean? As long as I try my best and I get as many opportunities as I can to direct and make these things, um, I'll keep doing it. So it's not like a competitive sport, you know.
That's
I
one thing I
mean,
wanted to ask you. I mean, in the sporting field or
mm,
some other areas, there's an ability for an athlete to hone their skills, to train harder.
mm.
How for you in comedy do you sharpen those skills? Where's that work done? I mean, you can't, I would imagine, just show up in front of the camera and just deliver. But for an actor or a comedic writer, where do you hone those skills? Where's that
Well,
hard work done?
I think the best way to do that is just by making stuff. And if you look at, and then this is the brilliant thing about YouTube, Facebook, all these different things, is you can make so much material and you can get it out to an audience very, very quickly. So you can learn very, very quickly whether, and you can look at it and go, oh, that worked, or that was a crack of shit, or whatever. And, if you look back to my early stuff, like there's been a huge progression, and, I look back at some of it and I go, I have learned, you learn from your mistakes more than anything else. But one quality you need, and this is very difficult to attain, and I attained this before I even started shooting stuff, is perspective. It's difficult to get that when you're making your own material. And I got that through writing, and I was writing from when I was like 15, even earlier, I think 12, 13, 14, 15. So I was writing comedy. And, you know, this perspective came from, I wrote my first script, handed it to someone, and I think, this is brilliant, right? And the person reading it goes, no, it's not. This is a crack of shite. The key to that is take that on and understand that it is a pile of shit. You've got to realize that this is shit. Why is it shit? How can I make it less shit? And that's going to be the first 10 years of your writing, really, unless you're a genius. But that's what writing is. It's writing rubbish and making it less rubbish and less rubbish and less rubbish and less rubbish. And I do read books and stuff. Reading really, I'm trying to read more. Reading helps me with writing. And I look at comedy shows and see how they're constructed, and I look at that. That really helps as well. Um, but yeah, just keep doing it and understand what mistakes you've made and how you can improve things. It's the best learning tool, and there's lots of tools on YouTube where you can learn. Where there's people giving tips and advice, and there's a lot of bad advice out there. But when you're doing it for so long, you start to understand what good advice is and what bad advice is.
Mhm.
And I think for any writer, if they want to get into TV, I think like The Wire and Breaking Bad are just essential things to watch, in my opinion.
For sure.
Even though The Wire's not comedy, what The Wire does, well, in my opinion, it's the best TV show I've seen. But in terms of for you to create a world for your characters to live in, you're not going to get a better learning tool than The Wire. Now, as I said, you're not going to learn comedy structure from The Wire, but what you're going to learn about is how to build a world. How to learn about plot and all, because it's the best, it's the most advanced. And Breaking Bad's the got to, and Breaking Bad is, what we done with Taxi Joe last year. There's a lot of inspiration from Breaking Bad and their world of characters. There's a quirkiness to, even you go into Better Call Saul, there's a quirkiness to all the characters involved in that too. So I loved Better Call Saul, and it was comedy, black comedy. And that's my favorite genre of watching things. But I tend to not watch as much as I used to. I watched a little bit of stuff there. I was off there for a couple of weeks and I was sick, and that's the only time really you would get to watch something stuff, and I watched a couple of the Oscar films and that. But generally speaking, meeting people is what inspires me, and I do get inspired watching certain films, TV shows, and different things. Yeah, but meeting people and being and experiencing different things with different people and meeting new characters is what really, really inspires me. In terms of writing, and then
Mhm.
you've just have to figure out, right, How are you going to mold this into a story? You mold it into a story, and then you take a look back at it. Does this work? Does it not work?
Now, I suppose just sort of to look toward your future and kind of what's
Mm,
next for you. First and foremost, we hope to see Taxi Joe again. I think this,
mm,
like you've said, there's so much more that can be done with that character and that world of characters.
mm.
But what's next for Taxi Joe? What's next for Gino Lynch, the filmmaker? And is there, or have you looked outside Taxi Joe in terms of what you want to write? Is there other things that you want to work on, other projects?
Yeah, absolutely. Eventually, I would. Now, in an ideal world, I would make feature films. Right. That would be in an ideal world. If this was the 1970s, I'd be making feature films. Right. Well, that's what I would want to do. But the thing is, when you're looking at the landscape and the way I'm looking at the film industry, because I work in the film industry, and you see the films that are in the cinemas now, and you see the films that do well and the films that don't do well, financially. And not that the finances of something inspires you to make whatever, but you've got to look at it, because when you make a show or you make a film, it costs a hell of a lot of money to make it.
Hmm.
What you find now with cinema is it's just all about intellectual property. It's all about Marvel, Star Wars. Like, film there a dodgy couple of years after COVID, but Mario Brothers came out at the weekend, and it's lifted 400 million worldwide. You know what I mean? Because of the brand and the franchise of it, and that's not the sort of storytelling that I'm attracted to.
Do you
You know
think
what I
that
mean?
the
So,
likes of the Francis Ford Coppola's, the Martin Scorsese's, do you think they're being kind of edged out?
mm, absolutely, yeah. So Francis Ford Coppola has made a film recently. What's it called? It's just finished production. Metropolis, something along those lines. Um, and he put $120 million of his own money into making this. So he's got a very successful vineyard company, and he sold half of it to finance this movie that he's making, because he
Hmm.
can't get the money. Well, now 120 million is a lot of money. I'm sure he could get 8 or 10 million potentially to make something, but 120 million, he's not going to get that money to make a film. This man's won Oscars for The Godfather. He's made Apocalypse Now, which in my opinion is the greatest film ever made. Like, this guy is in the Premier League of filmmakers, and
Hmm.
he's self-financing his own stuff. You know what I mean? So if
Yeah,
you're looking at me, and it's all right having dreams and aspirations, but you need to be practical about these things, right?
of course, yeah.
In my What I would just love to do is just make a film like Goodfellas or whatever, right? But Goodfellas came out over 30 years ago. You know, the times have drastically changed, and that's what I'm talking about cinema. You got Francis Ford Coppola, one of the greatest movie makers of all time, and Super Mario gets 200 million budget at the drop of a hat and makes a fortune, whereas Francis Ford Coppola has to sell half his vineyard to finance what he's trying to do. So
Hmm.
my point I'm making is, ultimately what I want to do is write and direct and storytelling. That's it's like this fire inside you that always has to get out. It's just this tremendous outlet for me, which I love to do. But I got to think about, right, well, is cinema going to be here in 10 years, or is it going to be even more tilted towards all those different franchises and stuff? Now, here in the future, if the opportunity arose, I'd love to direct a film, but you've got to be smart about it. You've got to be thinking, right, where's the audience?
Hmm.
The audience that were watching movies and going to the cinema in the 1990s are now watching TV. They're not going to the cinema.
Yeah.
Or less than 10% of that audience are going to the cinema. you know, the Pulp Fiction and all these brilliant. The '90s had a huge renaissance in independent cinema. The Coen brothers came out, Paul Thomas Anderson, Quentin Tarantino. All that style of filmmaking is now on TV. It's The Sopranos just changed the game there, in terms of sophisticated storytelling, because Sopranos achieved something that you can't do on TV. It achieved long form storytelling and character development that you can't do in a film, because film's only an hour and a half, 2 hours. These things, a series of Sopranos is 10 hours,
Yeah, yeah,
and you've got 6 seasons of it. There's 60 hours of storytelling. So that has sucked the audience in more. Netflix, Apple, all these different entities that are putting stuff on their streaming service, where the cost of the production isn't an issue for them. It's getting people to subscribe to the services and getting them sitting on their couch and watching the TV. So that's where I'm looking at, and I see potentially a more fruitful career making comedy, which is the genre that I want to do. In a long form format on television or streaming at the moment, rather than say making movies, if that makes sense.
Now,
You know what I
do
mean?
you have something currently in the works that we can expect to see, later
Well,
this year? Or,
I
I mean,
so I'm gonna
granted,
do
you've
stuff.
just essentially finished a major project, so not
Yeah,
to.
and the thing is, like last year, it cost a lot of money to make that. I self-financed it. It's the only thing I'm ever going to self-finance it. And the reason why we self-financed it was because we needed to make something where we could show production company we can do this.
Yeah,
Not that
yeah,
we've got the potential to do it, we can do it. So now it's about getting funding from other entities to make stuff. So, making short films around the world of characters around Taxi Joe is something where I want to go with. I want to shoot one in the summer, but then it's balancing workout as well, because you need to, do you know what I mean? You've life to live, haven't you? Do you know what I mean? You can't just
that's
go out
true. Yeah,
direct.
for
You
sure.
can't just go out making this stuff all the time, and it's getting that balance right. So yeah, we want to push the online stuff hard again, but it's getting the right material. It's what's right for the character, all that sort of thing. And I'm sure there's a huge chunk of people that watched the Taxi Joe web series we did last year, and they were disappointed with it, because it wasn't like the old stuff. You know what I mean? So, we may explore older formats of what we did, but we'll have to see. Like I'm working for the next few weeks, but we'll definitely come up with something in the summer. But it was an interesting thing. I remember when we were making the web series last year, I was saying, like, people mightn't like this, because with people online, they get into a thing where, or not on, but anything, they get certain perceptions of what a character is or what a TV show is. And if you stray away from that formula, they don't like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
So we did get a bit of that with the web series. A lot of people didn't like it because it was different to what we were doing. But what I found was the people that didn't like the initial stuff that we did, like the web series.
yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, I do see a big future for the character, and it's exploring all those different avenues. I think it's the short film thing and getting a festival run and establishing myself and getting the credentials as a director is going to help with potentially getting a TV show made. I think that's where I want to go next. Whereas if we just completely focus on the online world, I think you're missing that. You're at the minute, we need something to connect the dots between online worlds and broadcast. And I think doing a series of short films around all the characters and getting festival runs around those will hopefully help that.
Hmm. Well, I mean, for me personally, I thoroughly enjoyed the series. I've been lucky enough to see a little bit of your world. We worked with a little project many years ago,
Mm.
which I thoroughly enjoyed. We made a little documentary piece called "Portrait of a Fighter," that I think was pretty well received. But it gave me an insight. It gave me an insight into what you do as a filmmaker and as an editor. I see nothing but huge things for you, given the talent that you have and that you've shown. So, and that being said, I wish you every success. I look forward to seeing more of Taxi Joe and anything else that you do, because you are incredibly gifted. If I can just ask one thing, is it ever likely that the man himself, Taxi Joe, would feature in a podcast? Or, I mean, is that something that he would consider?
I don't see why not. But I would just need to work for the character. Maybe, well, why is he there? You know what I mean? So, yeah, as I said, who knows?
Is there a time?
I get it. Where, see, as I said, we're coming back to where I just completely focused on filmmaking. You know what I mean? And making stuff that way. As I said before, like, people would think I'd want to be an actor, and another thing you get is about stand-up comedy. Would you do stand-up comedy? And not saying that I would rule it out, but it's just something that's never come into my head. And I think to do like something like stand-up comedy, I've got a hell of a lot of respect for those guys, and the stand-up comedy scene in Belfast booming. You can't take that lightly. You can't just go, oh, I'm going to be a stand-up comedian now. It takes there's a lot of craft. There's a lot of work, and it's really hard. See, for you to get up on stage and make people laugh for whatever the set is, 15 minutes, half an hour, some of them an hour, that's difficult. And some of the guys that I know and have good friends that are stand-up comedians, they've been doing it for years. They've honed their craft for years. So I'm not saying I wouldn't do it, but I'm just like, would I go through that whole process when I can be spent that time making a film or writing a short or whatever? Do you know what I mean? It's just not something that I go, I'd love to do that. I might do it, but you know what I mean? Yeah. My focus is just purely on storytelling, writing. I think that's a big enough task as it is.
Oh, of course.
To get, and it mightn't happen, and you just don't know what's around the corner. You can't predict what the future holds, but I think it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of sacrifice to get to where I want to get to just do that. Never mind.
Yeah, I think you've showcased enough of your skills in that you've put yourself in a position where opportunities will come and good things should happen, because I think it would be a shame if it didn't. You are incredibly talented. I've always admired what you do. That being said, I would hope if this little podcast platform that I'm putting out there, if it were to be a success, I'd like to have you back on, because truth be told, I have about 2 pages of questions here that I haven't even touched upon. There's a wealth of stuff I could talk to you about, lad, and it's been a pleasure.
No, it's great. I've loved it. It's great. And the time's just gone like that, which is a great sign.
Here we are. It's almost an hour and 40 minutes chatting. I could continue to talk to you all day. I wanted, I suppose, to understand Gino Lynch, what your influences were, kind of your background, how you got to where you are. And I suppose I could save that for another episode.
Absolutely. Anytime. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So with that being said, I'll wrap it up for today. Gino, thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
No problem.